Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Brooke L French, author of Unnatural Intent. Welcome, Brooke.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. Loved the book. I found it I couldn't put it down. But before we really dive into it, can you give listeners just a quick snapshot of what they're going to find when they open up the cover of Unnatural Intent?
Sure. Yeah. So Unnatural Intent is the second in a series. It's the Letty Duquesne thriller series. It started with Inhuman Acts. And this series is set in a world where the balance of nature has shifted. Zoonotic diseases are crossing over at a higher rate. Animals are becoming more violent. And our main character is a disease ecologist who is trying to figure out why. In the first book, she's an academic and she is, gets pulled into a case of human rabies. And of course, that goes dreadfully sideways. By the time we find her in Unnatural Intent, she has made some changes. She's gone across the country. She's joined a foundation to try and figure out what's going on in the animal world. And her first case takes her to Alaska. She's taking over for a colleague who goes missing in the field. And so we sort of follow her on that adventure, which hopefully is as much fun to read as it was to write.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was a good read. I like a good thriller, and that it had that vibe to it. Why this genre? What attracted you to like the thriller suspense kind of genre?
Yeah, so it's what I've always read, they're the books that I am really drawn to, and I wanted to create that experience. I wanted to spend as much time there as I could. I think they're so much fun. It's really high energy, fast paced. I think it's good escapist fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where did the idea of animals going crazy come from? Because that's pretty much what the basis is. I mean, we've got animals that are not behaving the way we expect them to behave. They're not doing the things. They're not in places where they're supposed to be. Where did that idea come from?
So, gosh, where did that idea come from? I think usually my ideas for everything I've written come because I'm down a research rabbit hole. I really enjoy the research side of things, and I'll see something and I'll think, well, that's crazy, and I want to know more about it. And then I'll start digging. And I think that the original idea came because I was researching something else and I found an article about zoonotic diseases, and I got really interested in crossover and this idea of, the animal kingdom and how dangerous it was. And some of the scariest diseases that exist are zoonotic diseases. They're hemorrhagic fevers and, all of these just crazy, horrible things, which of course my brain being a dark, dark place, I thought, well,
whoa, yeah.
I want to know more about that. I want to write about that. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Well, I am also a research junkie. In fact, I use the hashtag research junkie because I can get down in a rabbit hole and never come out again. I have to remind myself, you're an author first, research is second. You can't do all the research. So I understand that, like, dive down and do the what ifs. Well, what would happen if this and what would happen if that? I'm also a science nerd. So much of what you were talking about, because we see her in a science lab and we see different things happening scientifically that shouldn't be, and all of the scary things. I want to know about this research. So tell me, like how was the research for this particular book? What kinds did you have to do? What are your sources? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. So the research for this one was, first of all, so much bigger than I realized it was going to be going in, right? So I had this idea I wanted to take Letty to the Arctic, but I've not been there myself, right? And I've never done scientific research in the Arctic. And so I realized pretty quickly that I was going to have to do a deep dive to get it right.
Right.
I got really lucky working with some scientists at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and they helped walk me through how this would happen and what she would use. And I mean, they really went above and beyond. They would get on Zooms with me and show me the equipment and teach me how to use it. You know, everything from how water samples would be taken to how do
Right.
you land a helicopter on pack ice, you know, because I realize that most readers are not going to call me out on it if I get it a little bit wrong, but I hate the idea of getting it wrong. And there's always somebody that knows, you know, I mean,
I know.
there's always someone who has that actual experience. And so I
And
don't
you
know.
don't want them to throw the book down and say, didn't happen that way.
Because
Right.
people will call you out on the tiniest
Right.
thing, you know, I mean, the tiniest thing. So anyway, that was my process for this one. I probably did too much research, because at a certain point, there's only so much I can use in the book about algae, but I still couldn't stop doing it. So.
Right. No, I understand that. I think that's one of the crazy things about the research. The more you do, the better the book becomes. But you have to be careful that the book isn't research.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you can put too much in where the reader is now overwhelmed with info, and it feels more like they're reading a textbook, and that's not what you're wanting. You're wanting it to feel real. And so you have to kind of go through and pick which of these 4 bazillion facts that you found, which ones are going to like move your story forward. Do you find that process hard, distilling down all of that information into something that you know your readers will want?
Sometimes, because sometimes I'm in love with a factoid, you know, and so I'm like, this is so cool, I've got to use it. And then, you know, maybe it just doesn't have a place in the book, but I also think that I learned that lesson before I even started working on these books. You know, when I decided I wanted to write things with a STEM basis, I started reading a lot of you know, sort of foundational books. Like I started reading a lot of Michael Crichton and a lot of the really old school giants in the you know, they call them medical thrillers, even though really they're not. They're more like science thrillers.
Yes, they're medical because someone gets a disease, but it's not really about
Yeah, it's not following a doctor along, which I think is really more what a traditional medical thriller would be. Patricia Cornwell, you know, kind of those books. But anyway, you know, in reading like the Michael Crichtons, I would read them and I would think, this is fabulous, but the science can get so dense. And sometimes to me, that really slowed the flow of the story.
Yeah.
Made it harder to enjoy it. So I was very conscious about not doing that in my books, even though the temptation is there. You know, of course, when you've done all the work,
you want to show everybody everything you've done, right?
You know, look how smart I am. But that's not in the best interest of the book, ultimately.
Right. And to me, it's a real balance of trying to figure out like which of these amazing factoids will move my story forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it isn't going to move the story forward, or it's not going to set the scene somehow, set the stage so that you know what, then you don't really have to have it in there.
That's true.
There was one author that I was working with who I felt like I was reading 2 stories. I was reading the novel, and then I was reading the textbook, and that's the way it felt. I kept feeling like I was being jerked out of the novel to read 2 or 3 pages of textbook so that I could then get back into the novel. And we want to avoid doing that. We want to find a way to take those facts and smoothly, and you did a good job, because like I said, I'm a science nerd. So I enjoyed that part, but I never felt like I don't know what she's talking about at this point.
Good. I'm glad.
This doesn't mean anything to me. I have no idea. So that's good. So in my review, I said that this was a book I couldn't put down, but I had to put down in order to catch my breath. How did you manage to write a book like that keeps me like on the edge of my seat? I had to keep reading, but then I would say, oh my gosh, I can't look. And I'd have to put it down for a few. I'd get up and maybe like go fold clothes or something. And then I would think, oh no, I've got to go back and read it. And I would be reading it again. I'd get to another point and I'd just have to close it up because it was like overwhelming to me. What is the secret sauce to keeping people on the edge of their seat?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, thank you. I think it's such a compliment, and that means everything, because that's the goal. You know, I mean, when you try to write when you're writing this genre, like that's what you're aiming for. I think that this is gonna be a controversial answer.
That's
so
all right. No.
I think
love
it's because you have to plot. You can't pants this kind of book. You can, Other people can. I can't.
You can't. Okay.
I can't. I don't think it's wrong to be a pantser. I think that if you're writing thrillers, it would be so hard to pants a thriller because.
So I agree. As a pantser.
Yeah.
And I am such a pantser that the idea of even trying to write a mystery scares me, because you have to be able to leave little Easter eggs all along the way. And if I don't know where it's going, how do I do that?
That's exactly it.
I would think that trying to edit a thriller that you pantsed would be a nightmare.
I think it would be. And people do it,
I know.
and the books ultimately, I think, turn out, some of them turn out excellent.
Right.
But you have to know that the editing is going to be years long.
Yes. Well, the editing is going to be its own thriller.
Right. Right. You're going to rewrite like
right.
50, 80% of the book probably by the time you're done. And there's nothing wrong with that. That method works too. I have a lawyer brain still, even though I haven't practiced in a long time. And inefficiency is really hard for me. I like to do things in a very like methodical kind of way, and so I'm a hardcore plotter. And I think that is what helps keep your pacing right. And because I have very consciously decided where my reveals are going to be. And sometimes the story has a different idea. Sometimes a character will do something that I don't anticipate, and I'll have to shift. But I do everything I do on purpose,
Right. Absolutely. Do you use a particular method of plotting? Like, is there a book that you follow? Is there a method that you use, or is this Brooke L French's method in her head? Do you have your own?
Yes and no. I think I use a variety of methods. I usually, when I'm starting a project, I know the beginning, the middle, and the end. I can see those things, sort of like mountaintops rising out of the water, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to get to those places. And then I usually start with an idea, some theme in mind, some, concept that I'm interested in. I always start with a prologue scene, and I know that a lot of people don't like prologues, but I've always got this fully formed idea of a jumping off point,
Right.
And then I will go look at things like Save the Cat or Romancing the Beat or, whatever, a bunch of other, I've got a bookshelf full of craft books. I'm a little bit of a craft book junkie. And I'll go and look at those for ideas for structure. How am I going to make this feel right and feel purposeful and feel satisfying? Because I write genre fiction, so the reader comes in with an expectation,
exactly,
and so I want to make sure that I'm going to meet it.
Well, like I said, you did a good job, because I was on the edge of my seat, but I'm the kind of reader, I get really intense. I'm an intense reader. And so I'm with the character. I'm feeling everything. When the character is being hit over the head with something, man, I'm down on the ground with them. I'm just right. So these things are happening, and I have to put the book down. Like, I have to catch my breath, because if it's too intense. My heart's racing. I need it. But then it's like, oh yeah, I can't let that go. I've got to come to at least a place where I feel like I can now go to sleep and wake up in the morning. But there's not a lot of places in your book that you can go to sleep with. It's like, okay, I think I can manage your sleep here. So that was really good. In addition to a fabulous story, which it is, and if that's all a person wants to go for, that's great. Do you have something else that you want your readers to kind of get out of the book? Is there like an underlying message that you're trying to put out there?
Not really. My books are they're meant to be entertainment. They're not, it's not trying to send a message or anything like that. And, it's funny because this series is about an ecologist. That's the main character, right? And so it does touch on some social issues. It touches on, climate change. Right. It touches on, social responsibility and, other things like that. But I really did not go in with that intention. And it is funny because as I was writing it, there were times when I was like, oh, this is going to make somebody mad, and I just decided, well, it is what it is. Right. And I read something Stephen King said a long time ago about, and I'm not going to remember the quote, but hopefully I'll get the gist right. basically that like if your character would to be true to a character, if they would do something truly horrible or say something truly horrible, you have to be willing to let them say it or to let them do it. And you
Yes.
can't censor that character back to make it acceptable or palatable, because you're doing a disservice to the book, you know, and to yourself.
Right.
And so I try to keep that in mind, and I try to let my characters be themselves, even when they're wrong, you know,
Right.
even
Right.
when they're
Well, and
wrong.
I think especially when they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't let your character have those moments when they make terrible decisions, then they're flat.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know about you, but I go through my life making terrible decisions sometimes.
Yes.
You
Usually
know,
with
and
respect to how much caffeine I'm taking in.
yes, you know, and you look back and you think, oh, that wasn't very smart.
Yeah.
I need my characters to be like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I make mistakes all the time. And so if you need your character to say the thing or to do the thing that's wrong, because otherwise they don't feel real.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's
can't
exactly right.
you can't walk around and go, Now your character has the tendency to sometimes do things without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
She just kind of runs headlong in and then goes, oh, that probably wasn't so smart.
Yeah, she
right?
does. Mm-hmm.
Where did that tendency come from? Is that something that you yourself have struggled with, or is this something you've seen with someone else? What made you decide that was going to be like kind of her MO?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't think I did decide that. I think she decided that, you
I
know?
know.
So like, because that's not me. I'm very risk averse. I'm a planner, you know, I'm not a run in first and figure it out later kind of person. But as I was writing her, she is, you know, and I don't think I made that a conscious choice. That evolved over the course of writing the character. Yeah.
Don't you love it how characters do that?
Mm.
How they kind of they become.
Yeah.
You know, I tell people that I have characters that literally live in my head.
Mm-hmm.
They're in there living their lives, and I'm almost like recording it.
Mm-hmm. It does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah.
Have you ever tried to have your character do something, and like I've gotten the message before that said, I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes. I'm not playing this with you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go stand over here against the wall and wait until you fix that because I refuse to be part of this. And 100%. You're like, fine.
I know. You're like, now I have to replot this thing. What?
Yes, seriously. It's like, look, I had it all figured out and now you're not going to play.
Yep. That's absolutely has happened to me before. It's very frustrating. But you know, usually once I take a beat and think about it, I'll realize that what the character's telling me is right. Okay. You know, that where the character wants to go is actually a better story. And it might take me a little longer. It might be a less direct route to where I was trying to go, but it's better.
In the end, you're going to like it a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I had a piece of my Daughters of Green Mountain Gap that I knew what I needed to write and I didn't want to write it. I personally didn't want that to happen. Mm-hmm. I didn't want it to happen. So I didn't write it. And I kept coming up with other possible ideas and just nothing was working out. And for about 6 weeks, the story did not go forward because I'm wrestling with this. And I finally said, okay, I'm going to write it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to write it. I can throw it out. It's not like I have to keep it. Well, as soon as I wrote it, the rest of the story opened up. I knew exactly how everything was going to end. And I feel like my character said, oh, we told you. Mm-hmm. And you wasted 6 weeks when you could have just done what we said in the first place. I almost feel like they're a parent. If you would have listened to me. You know?
But you know what? Those 6 weeks aren't wasted. I think that the more I write, I realize the importance of time and giving a story space. The first book I wrote, I was I was on a schedule. I mean, I just felt like I had to nail that. I had to hammer it out. Progress. And I was really nipping at my own heels. And, you know, why? Why? That it wasn't to any benefit. And ultimately, it took a long time to get that story where I wanted it to be anyway. And I think if you slow down in the process and you give yourself the room to do it, you know, you can. I mean, I still do that to myself. I still put a lot of artificial deadlines on my work, which is dumb, but I can't seem to stop doing it. So,
well, it's part of who you are. And so you're going to have to learn like to work around that. I
mhm,
did it to myself where I started getting very involved in word count. How
mhm,
many words? I'm going to get this number of words done. I'm going to get this number of words done. And I wrote about 20,000 words over a relatively short period of time, and I hated them. When
mm,
I went back and read them, I pretty much threw them away. I pulled
yeah,
them back out of the manuscript. I saved them off to the side because there might be a piece or two in there. But generally, I lost the voice of my character. I it was about words. It
mhm,
was about look at the number of words, and it had
mhm,
nothing to do with look at the wonderful story I'm writing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, so you have to kind of remind yourself it's like it's about the creativity and the process and the story, and it's not really about pages and words and hours spent.
mhm,
It's, you know, and it's hard to do because you can get very caught up
yeah.
in this, especially if you see other authors posting, I wrote 3,000 words this morning, and you're like, oh, so did I. Right.
Yeah, I don't give myself word goals. I belong to several critique groups, and so that
Hmm.
keeps me on track in terms of how fast I'm moving because I owe them pages, and so
Right,
every week
right.
I'm turning in pages. But I think that has a natural check on the desire to more for the sake of more because I'm getting critiqued on it, right? And so like I have a vested interest in making sure that it's good because I don't
Good,
want them to
right.
come
You
back
don't want
and
to you don't want to turn
not
you'd rather turn in 2 pages instead of 3 and have them be good. That's
right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I understand that completely. So let's talk a minute about critique groups. Do you
Mhm.
like that way of writing where you write a little and have someone critique, versus waiting until you're done and having someone critique?
I absolutely like to do it as I
Yeah,
go. Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate with the critique groups I have. I've kind of cobbled them together over the years with friends that I've met through workshops and at
right,
conferences and whatnot. And it's invaluable, honestly.
right.
Like, and not just because they're giving me that real time feedback on things, and they're watching the story build as I build it. So they can give me big picture feedback as well,
Right, right,
but also because I'm editing their work, and so my natural editor, my internal editor, has become very refined because I do that constantly.
right.
I'm reading and I'm editing. I don't even know how many words, pages a week, and so as I'm writing, I naturally edit myself, and that skill set helps as a writer. The two are
Absolutely.
very,
Absolutely. They're different.
yeah.
I feel like I'm using different sides of my brain. There's the creative part of me that's woohoo, and then there's the
Mhm.
editor part of me that's going, no, we got to rein that in. So it's two different sides, but they're both very necessary.
Yeah.
Um, I know that the first time that I had an editor look at my first manuscript that turned into a novel, it was a horrifying experience because in my mind I had the perfect book.
Mm,
It was my baby. It was perfect.
yeah.
What more do we need? And she saw lots of things that it needed, and it crushed me just a little. By
Yeah.
the third book, I actually couldn't wait to get it into the hands of the editor because
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, I've done everything to it I can do, but now I need some professional eyes that will come in and say this and this and this. Let's see if
Mhm.
we can work on that. And
Yeah.
and my big problem is I wander in the woods. So I give way too much backstory, and we wander around for a long time before anyone has any idea why we're wandering. And my editor told me with my last book, she said, Terry, if I weren't your editor, I would have already stopped. She said, it's a good story, but I don't know why I'm reading it yet. And
Yeah.
I'm almost halfway through. I was like, oh, I've done it again. And those are the kinds of things you don't notice because in my mind, I know where the story is.
Mhm.
So of course we're going to need all of this, and you have to go
Yeah.
back through and figure it all out. So it's
Yeah.
just good to have those other eyes that are willing to come in and tell you, the truth,
Mhm. Yeah,
right?
and the truth, especially on your first book, the truth can be
Yeah,
really hard to hear.
it
It's
is. It
because it
is.
is your baby. I mean, I remember with the first book I wrote, I can hear my son yelling in the background. Sorry for the noise.
Quite all right. That's quite all right.
The first book I wrote, I sent it into the query trenches, and I was just an emotional wreck. I was pins and needles. I was freaking out. Every time my email would ding, I was like, just losing my mind. And I reached out to a girlfriend and asked, who had written several books already, and asked her about how do you manage this? Because I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Right.
And she said, you need to start another project, because until you have more than one egg in your basket, you are going to do nothing but worry about that egg. You are just going to constantly worry. But as soon as you can see that you are more than the sum of that book, that you as a writer have more in you than that. And your success as a writer is not dependent upon what happens with that first project.
With that one book. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you're going to know that you're okay. And she was 100% right. The day I had that conversation with her, I went outside, my kids were outside playing, and I went and sat at the picnic table, and I wrote the first chapter of Inhuman Acts that day, because I thought she's right. And I sat down and I wrote the entire, just in one go, wrote that first chapter. Which ultimately has been my most successful book, Inhuman Acts. So it's funny because she was so right, and having that touchstone of the other writer, that kind of, because she's a critique partner as well.
Right.
That was really instrumental in my, in my writing life, in my survival as an author, right? Like being able to manage those feelings, because I think with your first book, the strain that you put on yourself is just insane.
Well, and then, I got my first book out, and my thought was, what if I'm I called myself a one-hit wonder? Like, what if this is it? What if I can't write again? Now what will happen to me? You do become very, very caught up in that first thing that you do.
Mm-hmm.
What are you working on now?
So book 4, I am about 70,000 words in. This is a freestanding book.
Okay.
It is due to my editor in February of 2026.
Okay.
So I built in an extra cushion with this one because I wanted to have time to let it sit and breathe, and so I can read it again. Plenty of time with betas before I send it off to her. It's another thriller. This one is a little less STEM heavy than my others, but I think it's
different characters, really, so it's not part of the series.
Okay. Yeah, completely new, freestanding. Set in Atlanta. Basically,
do you see it turning into a series? Another series? Maybe.
No. I kind of doubt it with this one. I think
really
this one is just going to be freestanding, and when I finish this, I will probably go back and write another Letty book.
Okay.
But then I have another idea that I kind of want to, I don't know. We'll see. I've got ideas. So you know what that's like. They're kind of swimming around up in there, and just got to wait and see.
I know. And I put my ideas down on like little, like a little something, and then I put it away, and it's like, okay, brain, I can't be in 32 places at one time. I'm finishing this one before I can start that one.
Yeah. I had to do that too, because I had a conversation with a girlfriend where we were spitballing ideas for one of her books, and I had an idea for one, and it wouldn't let me go. And I was like in the carpool line at school, and I was writing it in my head, and I thought, okay, I have to put this on paper, and I have to just close the Word doc, because otherwise I'm not going to finish.
I know it does. It's like, okay, look, I have to finish this. So I've got the idea down. Now be quiet for a little while. So
that's it. That's it. You put it in timeout. Go over there and be in shush.
Absolutely. So, hey guys, if you want to continue this book conversation, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a digital copy of Unnatural Intent. So find the post, tell me something that you liked or learned from this podcast, and you will be in the drawing. Brooke, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about your writing, your research, how do they do that?
You can find me on my website, which is brookelfrench.com. I'm also on social media. I don't actually know my
I'll have them in the show notes.
We can put them in the comments. Yeah. But you can connect with me there. I would love to stay in touch.
Fantastic. So guys, run right out, grab Unnatural Intent. It's a fabulous book. You will not be sorry that you picked that one up. Once you've gotten it, make sure that you go out and review it, because reviews are gold to authors. And Brooke, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.